But what about these books? This was not really connected to that paper, except in the sense that I guess I demonstrated over those years that I know a little something about rivers. I was doing research on them, and I'd done this Vanishing Rivers paper. But one day, back in 1999, my late colleague, Robert Wetzel, walked into my office, and he says, Art, I'm an advisor on an advisory board for Academic Press, and they want somebody to do a book on rivers of North America. And I said, well, gee, thanks for thinking of me, Bob, but I don't think so. That's a big project, but no, I can't do that. So he said, well, okay. So I walked out of my office, and then I just got to thinking about it. It just kept gnawing at me, you know. Who's going to do a book? A book like this is really needed. We just have no assessment of what our nations or our continent's rivers are like. So I changed my mind, obviously. And I got together eventually with Chuck Crumley, who's, I don't know if he's here tonight. Are you here, Chuck? There he is. And Chuck was the acquisitions editor, I guess, for Academic Press at the time, and he bought me enough dinners and enough drinks that I finally agreed to do it. And so that was just the beginning. I had to find somebody to help me out, and so I chose my longtime NABS friend, Bert Cheng. Bert knew the Western rivers and the Canadian rivers much better than I did. He was a great colleague. We had to find others to work on the book, and where did we turn to, of course, but NABS. We invited 23 other authors to head up each of the chapters. They invited their own co-authors. The majority of them were NABS members. So clearly this book would not have been possible without all of you, maybe not all of you, but many of you, and that I knew a lot of you. I didn't know everybody, but I knew people who knew people. And so thank you all for participating if you were one of those. We did 218 rivers. We included all kinds of things, as for those of you who have the books know, in terms of ecology, human history, geology, geography, and so forth and so on, and also some things about hydrology. And we put together for each and every river a graph that looks something like this, which I think is a pretty good way to characterize a river's hydrological characteristics over the long term. And it's basically a plot of red line is precipitation, mean averages for each month over long periods of time from USGS gauging station data. And then runoff, I'm sorry, I said that the wrong way. The runoff is from the USGS gauging stations. Precipitation is just from weather stations. And so it's kind of interesting to make this comparison. Here are two rivers from the East Coast. One at the top is the Ogeechee River, which I worked on. At the bottom is the Moisey River in Quebec. They have essentially the same precipitation pattern, but notice the runoff patterns are extremely different. The one at the bottom is obviously a snowmelt type river. The one at the top, there's no snow to speak of in this basin. But why does it have a peak in the spring and winter? Well, the reason it does, apparently, is because that there's a lot less evapotranspiration in the winter. And over the long term, this is what caused this behavior. And when we did this for all the rivers in the book, it turned out that this pattern that you see for the Ogeechee is true for most of the rivers of the southeastern United States, or the southern United States. For most of the rivers of the Midwest, east of the Mississippi, for most of the mid-Atlantic region. And it's only when you get up into the snowmelt areas that you get something more like the Moisey. Dave Allen and I took advantage of this in the final chapter, in which we plotted the fraction of runoff to precipitation for all the East Coast rivers that were in the book. And what we showed, of course, which is not surprising, but until you do it, you don't know, the fraction that runs off in the southeast is very low, only maybe 20%. You get up into the north, and where it's colder, and you have runoff of 70, perhaps 80%. So I thought this was pretty revealing. Another thing about the book is we were pretty fortunate in being able to construct some really, in most cases, pretty neat maps. I met together with Chuck. Chuck threw a party for all the prospective authors. We got together and I said, I need something from you. I know we need maps, but I don't know how we're going to do them. And it turned out that one of our authors, Jim Carter, happened to work for USGS. He put me in touch with one of their mapping people, and we were able to discover the U.S. National Atlas, which was online. I had a graduate student from our cartography department take this on. We produced about 240 maps, most of them like this. This is my favorite of the Yellowstone River, by the way. And it cost $15,000. Pretty good. I'll just finish up by showing you a little collage of some of the photographs in the river. It was never thought that we'd ever put any photographs in this book, but just because we had color maps, I said to who was then our new acquisitions editor, Chuck can move on to bigger and better things in California, and a woman by the name of Kelly Sonak, who really bent a lot of arms, I think, for a lot of things for this book. And she said, yeah, send us all the pictures you can get. And so I put out a late call to the authors, send photographs. And we got a lot of good ones, and they ended up being in the book. Here's some more of them. So, a few final thoughts on rivers, which has kind of been my thing. I've worked another system. But the good news is they're starting to tear down some of the obsolete dams. Some of you are involved in that. River conservation groups are involved in encouraging that sort of thing. More are being built, though, so that's not quite so good. The really bad news is the gigantic dams are being built around the world. And some of you are probably more familiar with those than I am, but I know of them. And they're going to cause enormous ecological and human impacts, or already have done so. Now, my concern is in North America, some of the people in power are going to discover those great northwestern rivers in British Columbia and Alaska that are not dammed. And these are kind of really the most pristine, unless you go in the Arctic area, the most pristine rivers. I worry about that. But my hope is that as NABS people, we get more river studies. A lot of us, still the main focus is on streams and other systems. But I know they're easier to study, but I really think there need to be more river studies. So, I've had my own evolution. That's a glimpse of it. I certainly wish you success in your own evolution. I hope you have many wow moments along the way. I plan on having a few more of my own. And thank you for your attention, and thank you for this great honor.